Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Golf Rules Questions podcast. Roscoe here, your co-host, sitting here alongside, in front of, on the screen with the man, the Golf Rules Questions man, the CEO and founder of Golf Rules Questions himself. I've given him a new title there. There we go. I can see him chuckling. Blakey, how are you? Welcome back for another episode. You well?
Yeah, going really well. Yeah, director, CEO, founder. I do everything cleaner. I clean the studio, so I built my own studio this week. It's covered in a ladder and sheets, so hopefully the sound is a bit better for all the listeners out there.
Well, your backdrop is covering what we can see as your new home inbuilt studio, and I'll leave it to you whether you want to share what the studio looks like to the listeners through your Instagram or wherever you want to do that. I'll leave that to you, Blakey. I've seen a little picture of it. Some people might find it interesting or creative, to say that the least, but you've got the Golf Rules logo question background. Now, in our little background bingo, there we go. There's something. We called it background bingo. We just keep evolving and doing something different. Background bingo. Now, I haven't received the feedback because we're actually recording these episodes pretty close together. So by the time you see last week's episode's background, we'll get your feedback and we'll talk about that in the next episode. But here's this week's background for those tuning in on the video on the YouTube, which you can go over to Blakey's YouTube and hopefully see this video. Same part of the world, Northern Hemisphere. We've moved countries. So last week and the first week's episode's background were the same country. This is a new country. So I would love to hear if anyone has seen this background, played this course where it's at. It's quite famous and probably in my all-time favorite golf courses, in one of my all-time favorite countries. But there we go. Have a look at this background. And if you're listening just in the podcast, you need to go and look at it at YouTube to see what we're talking about, or check out Blakey's Instagram page. Now, we talked about listeners and having some fun. We did offer up the opportunity for people to start to engage with us, and in the fullness of time, we'll hopefully bring someone onto the podcast and onto the video and talk to them live. Well, we're not doing that yet, but what we did get was a really nice message from Ian, and we're going to start by answering Ian's question. It was a voice message that he left through the Anchor platform, which we really did appreciate a lot. So let's play Ian's question, and then we'll go straight into answering that one, because we've touched on it in the first 3 episodes, and let's do a deeper dive on that.
Hi, Blakey and Rossco. Ian from Melbourne here, and loving the podcast. I follow Golf Rules questions on a couple of different platforms. Blakey, you use a lot of footage from pro tournaments to explain the rules, and you referee professional tournaments yourself. Can you explain some of the differences between the tour rules and the amateur rules? All the best, guys, and thanks again.
Now, Ian, when you are listening, and you will be listening, that brought a smile in the early days of podcasting to Blakey and myself. That brought a big smile to our face to hear that message, and you were very kind to leave that, and we do appreciate it. So anyone, please leave us a message and we'll do our best to answer your questions. Now, as I said before, Blakey, it's something that we've touched on and talked about. Last week we covered it off in that Rafa Cabrera discussion about the ball overhanging the hole, and just led into that discussion around the tour rules, and they have a little bit more leniency, it might appear so, versus us regular club golfers, and how we have to imply the rules or impart the rules ourselves. So from your experience in working on the tour, working in the Australian tour and some of the overseas work that you've done, what is the overarching guideline or perspective?
So great question, Ian. Thank you very much for listening in and providing a voice message there. And good intro there, Rossco, especially with your background bingo. I love that. But the biggest difference between the professional and the amateur game, obvious, is money. They play for it. The professionals play for it, and they also have money to set the golf courses up. So the rules themselves aren't so different, in that every rule that the PGA Tour has, or the Australian PGA Tour has, or the European Tour, or the LPGA Tour, a golf club, an amateur golf club, could have as well. Okay, there's some rules that you wouldn't have, like, you know, imagine you, Rossco, going to, I probably shouldn't use you because I know that you own a golf shop, but say me, you know, I hit a Pro V off the first hole and then I lose it, and then I go into my bag and I've got a TaylorMade ball in there, and I pick that out and, you know, proceed with whatever rule that I've proceeded under, whether I've hit it out of bounds and proceeding under stroke and distance rule 18.2 or whatever it is. But I can, the main point here is I can choose to use whatever ball I have, as long as it's a conforming golf ball. On the tours, not all of them, I think the LPGA got rid of this one, but on the tours, they have to use the same brand and model of golf ball. Okay, so if it's a Titleist Pro V1 X from 2015 model or the 2017 model, they have to keep using that throughout the round. They can't change to the 2019 model or the 2013 model. They can't change to the Pro V1 Black. They can't change to obviously a TP5 TaylorMade. So that's one rule that you'd have in professional golf that you just wouldn't have in club golf. You just wouldn't need it. Now,
can I add to that, just to provide a little bit of a historical perspective on, you know, probably one of the reasons why that rule did change, and it wasn't always the case back in the pro game. But if you listen to another podcast that I listened to, The Fried Egg, they did a great 3-part series on the evolution of the golf ball. And, you know, back in the day when the golf ball wars started to kick off, you know, we had the Bellata ball, and then we had the Serling cover ball, which performed like a Bellata, but they just had different trajectories, different flights, and one was great for distance and straight, and one was great for spin into a green. So you had this situation where golf pros were changing golf balls for different holes based on the strategy. So that's was one of the reasons why it sort of started to, you know, generate that rule. I could imagine, I don't know categorically, but, you know, we're going back to the 80s before you were born, Blakey. But yeah, there was a time when pros were using one ball for a par 3 and then another ball, and they realised that probably wasn't in the spirit of what we're trying to do in the professional game. Back to you.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely spot on. That's basically what the rule was about. It's about if you tee off with or start around with one ball, that same condition of and same characteristics of that ball, you need to keep using throughout that round. You know, some other rules, obviously temporary immovable obstructions, not like the one that you've got in your background. That would be an immovable obstruction because it's probably been there for 400 years. But when a golf course or a golf tournament goes to a golf course, they bring a lot of structures with them, temporary structures that the golf course wouldn't normally have. Now, I do personally think that this is quite, the players get quite lenient relief in a lot of situations from terrible shots into grandstands that would have gone out of bounds or would have gone into penalty areas or are in penalty areas, and they suddenly get free relief into a nicer part of the penalty area. But temporary immovable obstructions are basically the same as an immovable obstruction, but because it's temporary, the golfer also gets line of play relief if it is, and it has to follow these two conditions, if it is on their line of play and it's on their line of sight to the flag. So what that means is line of play could be anywhere, could be out to the fairway because you're chipping out sideways, could be back behind you, but you also have to have line of sight. So if you're chipping out sideways and your line of sight is through the tree to the green, then they're not exactly the same, so you don't get that you're not entitled to free relief. But if your line of play is to the pin and your line of sight is blocked from you to the pin or the ball to the pin, then you are entitled to free relief. And as I said, if you're in the general area, you drop in the general area, and if you're in the penalty area, you still have to drop in the penalty area for free, which is a good one. I don't have it on my YouTube. That's something that I will upload soon. But Bryson DeChambeau had one last year, I think, when he dropped from a part of the penalty area into another part. He couldn't get full relief from the line of play, but he got a much better spot and was able to hit a wedge 65, 70 meters over the grandstand. But that's certainly one that club golf, you're just not going to see it that often. I mean, the only thing I can think of is, I guess a temporary shed, but that's just not very often going to occur. Maybe if there's some works on the golf course, a fence or a digger or something like that, Rossco.
I'll just cast my mind back to the pro game for a sec. But so an example, now when I played last year at the Australian in the Oz Open Pro-Am, back at is it the 18th green, the par 5 with the water carry?
Yep.
There's an example of that where someone could potentially load up, if they've, gone for safety off the tee, not hit the longest drive, but they can reach the green, but they know that they've got to, reach it and they want to go with enough club. They can play for the, to bounce it into the grandstand.
Yeah. Because that grandstand was sitting, or the VIP structure was sitting right behind the green. And, a lot of people, and we've heard a lot of professionals actually say that, like, I was just aiming for the grandstand because I knew that I could get a free drop. And we've also seen balls hit grandstands that come back onto the green. So in a lot of cases, people would say, that the players are getting quite a benefit out of having that temporary structure there. That is possibly true. But, if Phil hits it in there, that he's most likely going to try and hit it out of it. And we all get that coverage on TV and we all love it. So it makes for a more interesting situation around those greens. Other things on the tour that are sort of the difference between club golf: resources, as I said, money. So resources of people that are basically, Augusta is one of a kind, but a lot of those big tournaments will have almost a team of 50 or 60 greenkeepers, green staff, maintenance staff, whatever you want to call them. They'll have a team of 50 people looking after, there might be 15 people on mowers after the game just cutting the grass. There'll be people repairing divots. There are other people possibly repairing pitch marks, raking bunkers. That's a big thing. So, people are able to set the golf course up every day. So, a rule around, or a local rule around that kind of situation is stakes. I don't know, what are the stakes at PK, Rossco? What are their definition? What are they considered at PK?
I don't think we have stakes at PK anymore.
Yeah, right.
For hazards, they're all little markings in the ground.
Yep. Yeah, I think, you might have bricks there, don't you?
Yeah, but I'm just trying to cast my mind back to like Mornington. The stakes are in the hazard markings you're talking about, yeah?
Yeah.
So you're outside the hazard?
Yeah, so if your ball is... So some courses, and I specifically talk about Australia, and I'd almost say it was 50-50, or maybe 70-30, Rossco, that penalty area stakes are deemed by the committee to be immovable obstructions. So even though you can move them, they're deemed to be immovable obstructions, meaning if your ball is outside the penalty area, you get free relief, you take the drop. If you're inside the penalty area, you don't get free relief, you don't get to take a free drop. You can either hit it as it lies or proceed under a penalty, of penalty area penalty relief.
So that's how I would always treat hazard markings as immovable, and therefore, you can get that benefit of a drop. I don't like to use the term benefit in taking a drop, but you can just, get the drop away from that. And sometimes it does benefit you when you're out of the hazard, but when you're in, obviously you're in the hazard, so you're in the caca. So, but yeah, sorry.
Well, no, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. So most people in the club game, and this is really important, most people would think of stakes as immovable obstructions that you either do or don't get free relief. But 30% of the courses around, and I'd say Australia, 30%, and every tour event, these stakes, they're just, the little wooden ones or plastic ones, are movable obstructions. By default, they're movable. That is, they're movable, and the committee hasn't said that they're immovable. So they are, I'm saying movable and immovable that many times, but by default, they are movable. And so on tour, they'll always be movable because, unless they're set in concrete, because there is these resources, these human resources that are going to put them back, which is what the committees at local clubs don't like, because players don't put them back. So there's these resources on the tour that are going to make sure they're put back, so they're always going to be movable. Now, if your ball's in or your ball's out, you can move the stake.
Right. So even when your ball's in, you can move the stake if it's deemed movable. And once, as you say, tour always. Some clubs around Australia, around the world, would have that as a local rule, yeah, or as a rule.
Just the rule. It's just that if it's movable, default is it's a movable obstruction. It's artificial. It's movable. It's a movable obstruction. To make it immovable, you either put it in concrete where you can't move it, or the committee say that it's a movable obstruction under a local rule, which they certainly can do.
So things like, directional ropings and the stakes in the ground, and sometimes you see, high traffic areas, those D-shaped bit of steel that sort of barricades those off, all totally just pick it up, move it.
I'm really glad you brought that one up, because you see the stakes with ropes, you see the little hoops. They're all movable because they're effectively movable, but got to read your local rules, because the committee might have deemed them immovable because they keep getting sick of people moving them without putting them back. So make sure you read your local rules when you're playing club golf. But if in a tour event, you'd never see that, because they would have been removed. I mean, we've gone around golf courses seeing that there's stake trees and they're 20 meters off the fairway and not even really in play. We've asked the greenkeeper to go around and small trees. And in Australia, it's very common to have this local rule of stake trees, turning a stake tree into essentially an immovable obstruction, or essentially you'd be calling it a no play zone, because if you're going to protect a stake tree, you want it to be protected from the golfer, so you'd make sure the golfer takes free relief. But we'd be asking green staff to go and remove every stake on every stake tree before that tournament starts, so that no golfer hits it 20 meters offline, 30 meters offline, and gets this free relief out of nowhere. So that's certainly
just on that. And we're just, once again, you can open up a rabbit hole and keep going down in different scenarios, but certainly I've been in an environment where I've seen someone claim stake tree relief. And I think the local rule, once again, I'm going back into the memory banks, but it was stake trees, deemed to be, be able to get relief. But then there's other scenarios where the trees are when they were deemed under 2 club lengths. So if it's under 2 club lengths high, that was a tree that you could get relief from, because it's obviously a juvenile tree. But there's been scenarios where the tree's been an established tree, but there's been a little stake from when it was a little wee one still there, and people going, stake tree.
Yeah, well, that's it. You're bringing up some great points here, Rossco, and that's why you're co-host with me, because you just got that wealth of golf knowledge. If the stake is still there, if the committee haven't gone round and removed it, and they've got the local rule in for stake tree, then that player can get relief. If it's a 30-year-old oak and the stake is still there, you're basically just giving free relief to the golfer for a terrible shot. It's nothing to do with protecting the tree, which is a shame. The committee should do definitely a ring around of their golf course once a month, just to make sure that stakes are still in place. They haven't been broken, they haven't been thrown away, and you remove any of those kind of issues where players are getting free relief where they shouldn't, or you're finding issues where the players should get free relief such as ground under repair very close to the line of play.
Now, please don't start scanning your own course for trees that may or may not be considered, saplings or juvenile or fully matured or whatever, and start pulling stakes out because you've listened to Blakey and Rossco and you think, well, that's clearly not entitled to relief. But the appropriate way is to go to your match committee. Every club's got a match committee. Bring up your issue, tell them about the scenario and just raise it with them, and leave the job of adjudicating that sort of scenario to those guys, and you'll be on your way. But it's not our job to walk around pulling stakes out because your mate got relief, got up and down for 4 or 3, won the hole and took you $20. Don't trudge back down there and rip the stake out and say that's never happened again. Go to the match committee and just bring it up to them and say, you owe me $20. No, just tell them.
Well, I like actually that point. I thought you were going to say, so if you ever want free relief, take a couple of stakes in your bag and just chuck a stake down beside a tree and take it.
Don't plant that seed, Blake. We'll be the enemies of match committees around Australia because some of my former playing partners do play for significant amounts of money on a week-to-week basis. Never me, but I'd hate for that scenario to happen. There you go. Anyway, we're a little off topic, but
no, we're never off topic, Rossco.
Well, exactly.
This is all good stuff. And you actually brought up the next one between the tour and club golf. We're still going with Ian's question here. Rabbit holes. So rabbit holes, you can get free relief because it's an animal hole, a hole made by an animal. Outside, you can get free relief outside of a penalty area. Now, on the tour, they will most likely have a local rule added to this saying you can't get free relief if it's just interfering with your stance. You wouldn't see that one in too many golf clubs, Rossco, but on the tour, if it's just you're just standing in it, bad luck. No free relief. It has to be on the tour. It has to be interference with your lie, your ball, or your swing.
Yeah, right. What about so once again back to the new definition of penalty area and versus bunker, diggings in a bunker.
Diggings in a bunker. If it's an animal hole, you get free relief regardless. That's the rules of golf. But if it's if diggings would be considered a hole, but if it's a kangaroo's footprint, you wouldn't get free relief from a kangaroo's footprint unless the local rule for animal footprints or animal hoof prints has been brought in. So if it's a one-off, your committee is most likely going to say, "Oh, that's just bad luck. We're not going to bring in a rule." But if we have a few golf courses around here that have kangaroos all over the place, Anglesey, Mallacoota, Lakes Entrance, golf courses like that, they're most likely going to have that local rule for hoof prints in a bunker because, they basically farm kangaroos at those golf courses. It's their small little arms, like they sort of, looks like a kangaroo sort of has that small arm. They can't hold a rake. So it's just really unfortunate that they don't rake the bunker after they go in there.
Well, you sort of led with a little bit of a joke there. Can I tell you a story? I'm going to try and bring a little story from my past, and how long I go back, probably relevant to how long I can remember. But this is a story from my past about diggings, which you may or may not find interesting. But after maybe one too many raspberry lemonades, and that was the drink of choice when you were a non-golfing kid, when your dad used to take you to the golf club and sit you outside on the veranda in country New South Wales and said, right, here's your chips and lemonade. After maybe one or two extra raspberry lemonades, I took myself off for a walk, found myself in a bunker, and had the crazy idea, because I was into cubby house building and digging and in dirt and all that sort of thing, as you do when you're like 4 or 5. I thought that I could tunnel under the green and come out of the hole and make a little hole. So I did actually try and dig in the face of the bunker with the full intent to go up to the hole, but I wasn't successful at that, Blakey. Anyway. Minds of a small child. Minds of a child let loose on a golf course after one too many raspberry lemonades. There we go. What's next, Blakey?
So next, I think we actually have, there's a fair bit more that you could talk about that, but we'll leave that for another day.
Ian, thank you once again. I hope we've given you some indication that there are differences in the rules and how they apply on the tour, and some of the things that they can do versus money versus just the efficiency of running a club competition versus the tour. So yeah, there's some differences there, and keep firing the questions in, mate.
Yeah, I guess, the other thing we could certainly talk around that is the terms of the competition. They're a bit more watertight, and eligibility and withdrawing and what would be really a lot tighter than club golf would be your tee times and making sure you make your tee time. So yeah, that's another thing we might even do with pace of play and starting your round in another podcast episode. So we'll come back to that kind of those kind of things in another one.
Pace of play. There'll be some listener questions there, and I've watched the women's golf at the Renaissance Club last week, and it was pretty obvious there were some issues around pace of play there, but we'll talk about that. And Stacey Lewis did a great job, and once again, half a mental job on her for maintaining her composure in what was unfortunately horrendous slow pace of play. I love watching the women's golf, and I love watching it last week at Troon. I love watching it at Scotland. It's sensational. Can we go to the moving equipment video?
Yeah, so we didn't cover this in the last episode because we just ran out of time a little bit, but this incident happened in the US Amateur, just a couple of weeks ago, and I just wanted it wasn't a big one. No one really cared about it because it's such an easy rule, but if a ball's in motion, you basically just got to leave everything as it is, except for obviously as a player you can get the hell out of the way, or you can push someone else out of the way. You can also move a ball that is at rest on the putting green. You can mark that and get it out of the way if it's your ball, and also obviously player equipment. And this little incident, you can see it on the YouTube there.
Let's have a listen to it.
Gotta make just perfect contact. Oh, that's sounded thin there, guys. Yep, a little bit in the forehead there, and now he's got some stress. If it keeps going, this could end up down in the penalty area. No, but he's going to have issues on the backswing as well.
So what unfortunately happened there for the young player, he's chunked his ball short of the green, playing a pitch shot to try and make up and down. Hit it a bit chunky. It's come back down the slope towards his opponent, and the opponent's caddy has quickly and swiftly moved his bag out of the way as the ball was tracking towards the penalty area. It didn't go to the penalty area. It stopped short of the penalty area. So that's okay, yeah?
Yeah. So, funnily enough, in years gone by, 2 years ago, if you hit your ball and it actually ended up hitting an opponent's bag or opponent's caddy, you could actually have the choice of cancelling your stroke and replaying it, or playing it as it lies. Now, I don't know about you if you've had any experience with this, but I have heard, I've never seen it myself, but I have heard of a story where some players would do that on purpose. They'd sort of see where the opponent's bag was and sort of go, oh, well, if I hit it there, if it misses, it should be all right. If it hits it, I'll get another try. So, you know, I might end up dropping my ball dropping my ball in a better spot. Anyway, they've got rid of that. So it's just, if it hits the bag, there's going to be no penalty. It's the accidental deflection under Rule 11.1. But 11.3 tells us that anyone can move your equipment or yourself out of the way so as not to accidentally deflect or stop that ball. So there's no issue, but it's good to get these ones on television and see them happen, and then, you know, talk about them and how they, you know, what the rule actually is. Because some of these ones, you know, we spend a lot of time talking about immovable obstructions, penalty areas, out of bounds, unplayable balls, but there's some of these little ones that you don't really see too often. So just getting an example of it is quite good.
Can we go back to the green scenario? So, you know, I'm in the bunker. Your ball is on the green, maybe not in my line. I can ask you to move the ball, mark the ball. What happens if I play out of the bunker, you're over at your bag, but our other third playing partner is on the green, my ball is tracking towards the hole? Can he walk up and mark your ball and move it out of the way so my ball doesn't get impeded by your ball on the way to it going in the hole?
So we're playing stroke play, Ross, and we're all players and other players can consider in comparison to each other, correct?
Yeah.
So because it's stroke play, if he moves my ball, he doesn't actually have to mark it. He can just pick it up and move it. Deliberate or accidental movement of a player's ball at rest by another player or a spectator is no penalty, and you just replace the ball on the estimated spot where it was moved from. So that's under Rule 9.6. Now, if it was me, if I hadn't marked it and I was close to my ball, and then it looked like your ball was going to hit my ball, I would have to mark it under Rule 14.1. Otherwise, I'd incur a penalty under 9.4. So if it's my ball, I have to mark it on the green before I lift it, because it's a deliberate action that I'm doing. If it's my ball and another person is going to get it out of the way effectively, they can do so without marking it.
So it can be moved. So my ball's tracking towards the hole, because I'm going somewhere with this. My ball's tracking towards the hole. My playing partner, who's not, you know, it's a stroke round, it's individual stable, whatever, he can walk up and just pick it out of the way and go, oh, there you go, ball, you know, do your best to get in the hole, yeah? Put it, and then just places it back.
And that changed 1 January 2019.
Okay. So then does that same rule then apply? And it's a topical tour related sort of discussion point, because people have been accused of it, girls and guys, in the backstopping scenario. So your ball's behind the hole. I get a bit chunky custard out of the bunker. You're up there on the, you know, checking your phone in your bag. Other mate comes on and says, oh, that's past the hole. That's going to end off into the bunker on the other side, and pick your ball up and do the same.
Absolutely. So
he can someone else can benefit you and then punish you as well from a backstopping scenario.
Yeah. Now, the backstopping will almost take a whole episode talking about that. But what we can talk about, what we were going to talk about, is just, you know, applying the rules of the game and the spirit of the game. So, you know, why do we even have golf rules? Well, do you have an answer for that, Ross? Why we even have golf rules?
Well, I know that in Leith, Scotland, in 1744, where they were drawn up, around the corner from where my mum and dad grew up on Leith Links, which is where what became the Honourable Company of Edinburgh Golfers. I think they drew up 11 initial rules, and we should talk about those initial rules at one stage. That's what a bit of a history lesson. We should go through those. But I certainly know that a lot of the things that we talk about, and rabbit holes is one of the things, diggings is one of the things in those original rules, emanated from there. And match play was a big thing, and still is a big thing in Europe and in the UK, and a lot of the golf was match play related. So they just started drafting some rules around the game of golf to keep it, on an even keel. Now, 1744, I can just imagine that there was other things with rules in place in life back then, and it just emanated that we would have this ongoing evolution of rules. That's not an answer to your question, why do we have rules, but just that's an answer that old Tom Morris's long-distant nephew or cousin or whatever in the episode tells us that they were where they were invented.
Yeah. So, I mean, why do we have rules? Is because without rules, there'd be chaos. No, that's a Kramer quote. I love that one. So, but without rules, basically, you can't define what the actual game is. So you can go out and you can play at your local club, and you could hit 2 balls, and you could have 3 putts, and you could go to a par 3 and hit as many balls as you like, trying to have a hole in one. But, is it really a hole in one? No, it's not.
Excuse my outside influences there, annoying our podcast.
No, you're fine. So the rules are there to define what the game is. So, if you go and hit the balls, you can do that at the driving range. You can do it on your own golf course. That's not actually golf. Golf is defined by the rules themselves. And yes, they are complicated, but they're necessarily complicated because the golf course, as we see behind you, is not the same. You can have 2 different golf courses 3 kilometers apart. There's different things that happen on a golf course. There's toilets on the golf course. Have you ever seen a toilet in a tennis court? Have you ever seen a building in the middle of a rugby pitch? There's lots of things at golf course, because it's such a big area, that require these rules to help you get around them. And, are they fair? Well, personally, I like golf because it's not fair. And so you have to, and I've said it the first 2 episodes, and I'm going to say it again, golf is a test of your character before it's a test of your skill. So how you deal with the situations, and this might be another one where people can go to Mental Mastery podcast, how you deal with the situations is what golf is all about. And so, yeah, there's some rules that to beginners won't make sense, but they've been thought out for over 200 years, and they've been adapted and changed. And we just had a massive change 19 months ago, and we're still figuring out the game of golf under those rules. If we told beginners who just started this year that you weren't allowed to ground your club in a penalty, water hazard, weren't allowed to move sticks or whatever, they'd think that you're crazy. But that was just the norm for us growing up, that you just weren't allowed to ground your club. So, that's probably not an answer either, but it's just the fact that you have to have these rules to define the game. And then, because golf is all about that character, you are your own referee, and you should know the rules, put a little bit of study into learning the rules. I mean, the people that listen to this podcast, I'm probably preaching to the already converted, but you know, you should do a little bit of study, and it's not that hard. Watching the videos is probably the easiest way, just to get a sense of what you can and can't do. And then just ask questions from people and go out and do, as we said a couple of weeks ago, just go out and do and play and learn. And then, you know, uphold that spirit of the game of golf, that if your ball's not in the hole, you know, you can't just pretend that it is. You know, if your ball's in a penalty area, you can't just pretend that it isn't. If your ball is lost, you can't just drop another ball out of your bottom of your pants and to you believe that you're still only playing your second shot. You know, you've hit a wayward shot. You've got to take that penalty.
Well, Blakey, that is one of the things, and what you've just summarised there, for those of us that do this wonderful game and those listening who are all golfers, it's one of the reasons why we love it. It's one of the reasons why we come back, because it's a great test of skill. It's a great test of character, and you know, it's a great game for mateship. It's a great game for camaraderie. It's a great game for families, and yeah, the rules help us, guide us along a pathway to being successful at the craft and enjoying it. And everyone has to abide by the same rules. And I think it's in many ways a way that a game that shapes us. Yeah,
well, I believe that both of us would play this game for the challenge that it brings. It's not going to give you exactly what you want, because then you wouldn't come back. You know, if it's easy, everyone would be doing it, and then people would get bored. This game is not easy, but it's certainly enjoyable from a challenge point of view, to test, as I said, test your mental ability or mental stability, and that's why we have rules. And then, yeah, as I said, you do a little bit of study, and if you break the rule, if you're in the middle of the rough, you know, no one else is around you, got people are down the fairway, they can't see, and your ball moves, you're the only one that knew that it moved. You will work out whether you caused it to move or not. If your club's right beside the ball, and when you place the club down, the ball basically moves straight away, it's going to be at least 95% virtually certain that you caused your ball to move. Or if an easier example is if you kicked the stick and the stick hit your ball and caused it to move, then you've got at least 95% virtual certainty that you caused your ball to move. You've got to add that penalty. You've got to replace the ball. You've got to add that penalty. People say, "Oh, you're a great par," or you know, nice birdie, and you say, "Oh no, actually, I had a 5, or I had a 4 or 5 or 6, whatever it is, because I've got to add a penalty." And they go, "Oh, you know, that's the first time that they were aware of it." But that's part of the rules of golf and part of the spirit of the game, is that, you know, you're going to go to sleep and you're going to live with that. Are you happy to hide it from yourself or hide it from other people? Well, hopefully not, because that is not what we breed or what golf is about. Golf is about holding yourself high in integrity and honesty of what you actually scored on the day.
Well, Blakey, you mentioned a couple of things there, and I guess we're going to wrap it up because we're at that time when we start to bring it to a close, unless there's anything else that you want to talk about. But you talked about studying and learning. And as ambassadors of the game, if you are listening, you are an ambassador of the game. We've anointed you. Blakey, you are an ambassador of the game, and myself, you know, for doing what we're doing and trying to bring some more information to people out there in a fun and informative way. We're trying to do our little bit. And in terms of learning, you know, one of the things that, you know, where you are working on is some resources that outside of your YouTube channel, which you should go and subscribe because there's some great videos on there. We're working on some resources that are going to be easy, fun, and easy to digest and understand, resources that you as ambassadors of the game, the people listening, can pass on to someone who, you know, you might think they might benefit from that, like some little handout guides and whatever else is, you know, we're still very early stages, but we're working on some stuff that, you know, will help people learn in a structured learning way. So, yeah, I haven't really blown anything out of the water there, have I, Blakey, by saying that?
Oh, I think there was a perfect little watch this space kind of promotion there. And, you know, yeah, as I said, I'm out there to promote, and you know, with you as well as my co-host here, and we're out there just to promote the education of the game, you know, not just swing thoughts and, you know, it's whether you've got your club head parallel at the top and whatnot. There's also the education of the actual game, the actual rules of the game and the actual spirit of the game. I think we've run out of time to sort of talk about being your own referee and what you do. So we'll have to leave that for the next episode. I mean, you know, you said it's before, we keep opening up this or going down a rabbit hole or opening up a can of worms. There's just so much that we can talk about in terms of the rules of golf. And if everyone continues with us on this journey, they're certainly going to get a lot of information from us.
So listeners, park that in the memory bank, being your own referee. We'll come back to that. And please, backdrop bingo, get involved with that. Send us where you think this course is. It's probably a no-brainer. Just jump on that. And please keep sending through some questions and the content that you want to hear, because that's what this is all about. You know, we've dedicated pretty much a whole episode to answering one listener question. Let's keep that fun format going. Blakey, once again, it's been great. Loving what we're doing. I'm learning every week. I learn something new and hopefully add something new. So appreciate you having me on here, mate. I really do.
Yeah, no, it's been great, and I love listening to your stories for the examples.
Don't dig under bunkers and try and think that you're going to come up the hole. Listeners, please don't do that at all.